All right, let's see how this goes. Hi everyone. So I'm going to be chatting with you today about everything that I read in June, finally, and also everything that I unfortunately DNF'd. This was genuinely one of the worst reading months I think I've ever had. I DNF'd more books than I finished, so it was a pretty rough month. I also just had a ton going on. I pretty much haven't been home any of the weekends this month. As an introvert, I definitely felt the lack of recharge time. So that might be part of the more mellow mood that you might be sensing on me. I'm fine. I'm just tired. Hence me having to skip some uploads. So formatting wise, I think I'm going to be a little bit more brief with talking about some of the DNFs. Some of them I think are just kind of like catching strays because I was just not having a great time with reading and I wasn't really finding the type of book that I was really hoping to find. If I made it further in, then we'll definitely talk more in depth about it. For the books themselves, I don't know how much detail I'm going to get into with all of these. I did not do a lot of preparing of my notes because, as I mentioned, I'm very tired. I'm kind of off-roading a little bit, so we'll see how this all goes. Do a blood spill in the woods for me. Let's jump into the books. So the first thing that I did last month was do a reading vlog. Ultimately, I was hoping that I was going to be able to crank out 2 different vlogs. Obviously, that didn't really happen because I haven't been posting for like half of the month of June, so whoops. First one that I tackled was The Heir Apparent's Rejected Mate by Cate Wells. This is the second book in the 5-pack series. It's a shifter romance. We've got fated mates, prize pregnancy. In this one, our heroine is of like a lower tier within the pack, or they tend to reuse things. Also tend to be a little bit more in touch with former Wolfey ways. The rest of the pack has kind of modernized and acts more like humans because they're trying to like make nice with humans so that wolf shifters don't get wiped off the map. And so our hero, because he is the heir apparent or next in line to become alpha, is part of that upper tier. So when our heroine ends up going into heat and is like, Cate, hey, you are my mate, he knows that he has to reject her to kind of keep the status quo, because if he takes like a lower ranking pack member, it's going to be perceived as weakness and potentially he could lose his heir apparentness to his uncle. And then the heroine ends up pregnant because, you know, heat makes them do horny things. Kind of the long and short of it. So this one, I think the relationship, although there's kind of like hate to love, he's never fully cruel. He's just sort of going along to get along because he knows he needs to be the alpha, even though I think on an instinctual level, he kind of knows that that doesn't really fit what he wants to do or how he is as a person. This is like a persona that he has to kind of put on in order to appease other people in his life. And with the heroine, I like that she definitely had a spine. When she got rejected, she was like, I'm gonna figure this out myself. Unfortunately, I think this just felt a little bit short because I think that there was either a pacing issue or we just needed more pages. There was just so much that kind of got compressed, I feel like, or was underdeveloped in the second half of the book. That one I ended up giving a rating of 4 stars. Then I moved on to Ashes with Dylan Page. Why do I keep saying that? Ashes by Dylan Page. It's the 3rd book in the Bleeding Hearts series. It directly follows the Torment duet. It's a high school bully, why choose reverse harem? Is it motorcycle club? We never found out. And it's got like childhood friends to lovers. Basically, the heroine used to live on kind of like the wrong side of the tracks, on the poor side of town. Her mom, when she was younger, ended up getting married to a guy from the rich side, and so they moved over to that side. She had to say goodbye to all of her friends. And when her mom and stepdad passed when she's in her senior year of high school, she ends up having to go live with her father who lives on the poor side of the tracks again, and she ends up being reintroduced to all of her childhood friends and also realizes like how bad things have gotten on like the poor side of town. There's a lot of gang violence. I guess she starts banging all 3 of her best guy friends because why not? This one was so frustrating. I really like rage DNFing this book because I think because I have such like good memories of the Torment duet, I really felt like those had like really rich and complicated characters that felt realistic. I felt like with this story, it was like almost the opposite. The characters were very flat, like a vehicle for tropes. It felt like more than anything. I think there was like some hope that I had at the beginning feeling that we were building towards something more interesting. But I was like 70% into the book and I was like, oh my God, like absolutely nothing has happened in this book. This is crazy. And then I just felt like things were just happening because trope, because plot, because the author said. There was no real like logical reason as to why those things were happening. I think it just gave the book a very like juvenile, immature feel. Honestly, after reading that book, I was like, is this what Dylan Page normally writes like? Because I don't want any part of that. Yeah, I DNF'd at 70% and I was pretty pissed off. And then the last one that I have is Lawless God by Lola King. It's the 4th book in the North Shore series. This one is like an enemies to lovers. There's a forced marriage. We've got gangs. We've got captor captive. So it's obviously a dark romance. Basically, the heroine is the leader of the King's gang in the North Shore, and she's had to make some sacrifices to get her gang ahead. One of those sacrifices that she had to make was kind of like offering herself up on a platter to someone from the Cosa Nostra by the name of Nathan White. Eventually, Kaylee decides that she wants more power. She basically wants a new agreement. So she goes to a different gang called the Wolves, and part of their negotiation means that she's got to get rid of Nathan. So she lies on the stand to basically put him away for life. Those charges don't end up sticking, and he comes back and dismantles her life piece by piece, driving her into his arms in the name of protecting her gang. I think this one took like a lot of the concepts of Ashes, but just executed them in a way more fun way. It was wild, it was unhinged, it was action-packed, it was fast-paced. There's a lot of things that mirror that first book in a very satisfying way. I liked this exploration of their feelings very slowly changing, but at the end of the day, these are two very violent people with very violent, explosive emotions. I just found this book quite fun because there was just like these scrappy characters and these conniving plots, and it just wrapped up the series, I felt like, in a fun way. So I ended up giving this one a rating of 4 stars as well. So then after my vlog, I went on a DNFing streak. I DNF'd 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books in a row. Then I finally read a duet that stuck. Huzzah! I read Archetype duology by MD Waters. So it's a sci-fi thriller with romance kind of threaded through. It's got a dystopian setting. We're dealing with, oh my God, I almost spoiled things. Good thing I caught myself. Well, I guess I could have edited it, but regardless. Okay, so basically this is set in sort of like a Handmaid's Tale type of future. Basically, fertility rates have really dropped. Male babies are highly prized. Female babies basically go to like a training center to learn to become wives. And our heroine ends up waking up in this reality, and she's told that this guy, Declan, is her husband, but she doesn't remember anything from her past. She's told this is normal, and they're trying to just like get her better so that she can go home with her husband. But at night, she's plagued by these nightmares that they're very concerned about. And when the doctor asks her questions about it, her inner voice urges her to keep quiet about them because it's about her love and devotion to a different person. I thought that the first book in this duet was a lot stronger than the second one because that first one has a very strong thriller feel. It's got that romance like threaded throughout, but it has such good tension because of that thriller element because you're trying to uncover what she doesn't remember. What do these dreams mean? What happened to her that caused this accident? Things that you kind of know aren't piecing together correctly, but at the same time, you don't feel like you can quite get answers. And so it was just kind of fun to try and put that all together. I think the second book felt a little bit more like an action dystopian. I think that this one was supposed to have like a little bit more romance, but I'm gonna be honest, I think that the romance is like pretty subplot. I don't think it's the best developed. So definitely go into this because you want like a thriller or an action dystopian rather than a romance, because I do find that that was like a little bit more surface level. I didn't find that there was like a ton of like character development. And I felt like in that second book, the reveal was like weirdly anticlimactic. Like it had been seeded, but I also just kind of felt like, well, yeah, why not? And then I kind of realized in that second book how many plot holes were in the first book. It's like clear that certain characters had more information than they acted like they had in certain scenes. So overall, I had a good time. I was happy to at least like finish a couple of books. I'm giving both of them a rating of 4 stars. Then I read Bound by Hatred by Cora Reilly. This is the third book in the Born for Blood Mafia Chronicles. So this is obviously mafia romance, arranged marriage, enemies to lovers. So we have our heroine Gianna. She watched her sister Aria marry a really high up guy in another mafia group that she like barely knew, and she just really realized in that moment that that's not really something that she wants for herself. She hasn't really liked mafia life. When her dad ends up promising her to Matteo, she ends up running away rather than going through with the wedding. But unfortunately, the mafia is pretty darn good at tracking people down, and they end up finding her abroad and dragging her back. I'm really sad about this book because overall, I thought I was gonna get like a solid 4-star, that Gianna was gonna have this like incredible character arc, and I don't know, it just like didn't quite deliver. It was a little bit of a slow start. There was a lot of overlap with the first book, a lot of the same scenes, but just from a different angle, which I just don't find the most interesting. It takes like 35% of the book for it really to get going. Once we finally like got these two characters in the same room, I did enjoy their dynamic. There's kind of this like hate fuck, this push pull, this I don't want to like you, but I kind of do. Matteo likes to play mind games. I like that he's kind of cocky and sure of himself, and Gianna's kind of brash and bratty and just doesn't really care what people think. It just made for a lot of fun verbal sparring between the two of them, where you kind of could see their feelings develop slowly because there is a little bit more playfulness that develops in their banter. So unfortunately, I think this one really lost me in that third act conflict. I just felt like Gianna was still the bratty, headstrong character that she was at the beginning. It almost felt like she sort of regressed just to make this third act conflict happen. It made that HEA just feel a little bit unsatisfying. There was a part of me that felt like, well, Matteo deserves better because he is so devoted to her throughout the entire book, even when she doesn't want him, even when she has her claws out, this man wants her fiercely. But I think that she was just so stubborn that she never took the time to determine if her feelings had changed, if she felt differently. She was just kind of like, well, this is the image that I have and this is what people expect of me, so I'm just gonna do that thing, and just but then only to like change her mind like 4 seconds later. The whole third act was very frustrating for me, and I felt like really ruined what could have been this really satisfying HEA of her really reevaluating what she wants out of life, and just I think it could have just played out a little bit different and been really great. So unfortunately, this is a rating of 3 stars. So then, oh shoot, I had another DNF. This one might be on me. The Poet Empress by Shen. So this is a historical fantasy. It's like kind of a forced concubine. It's got a very interesting magical system, themes that are very dark about like abuse. This is set in the Azalea dynasty. The land has been consumed by famine. So the heroine's part of a family that's starving, doesn't have a lot of options. And so when there's an announcement that they're looking for potential concubines to this very villainous prince, she's like, well, I'll offer myself up because then at least hopefully my family and my town can be taken care of. But when she gets there, she finds herself subjected to just absolute cruelty by everyone and anyone. And she has to get very politically savvy very quickly by learning more about the people around her, especially Wei, the prince that she ends up being a concubine for, who is particularly cruel to everyone and is very vicious, but especially to her. So she needs to get to know him better in order to figure out how to survive. So this one, I was actually enjoying it quite a bit, but that's because I thought this one was a romance, and it's not. I found out about halfway through that there's no HEA, and I'm kind of confused because I feel like some of the marketing that I saw for this suggested that it was a romance. So yeah, unfortunately, this was one that just kind of was like not what I signed up for, because I was like, oh, we're gonna get redemption and it's gonna be beautiful. And I was like, oh, so that's not coming. But I will say I did enjoy overall what I had read. I liked watching a heroine that really just didn't know anything about court politics, really very quickly get savvy about strategizing and how to manipulate them, how to get on people's good sides in a very like earnest way. Like she just wants to survive and be left alone, and these people keep coming after her. And so it's really just done out of survival. She also just wants to really learn magic, even though it's like illegal for women to do anything with magic, which is like based in poetry, which is really fun. And it's just a lot of her like honing her smarts while experiencing just unspeakable cruelty. Get a lot of the background of what's happened to the hero and the environment he was born into and the siblings that he had and the dynamics that were there and the politics within the court that were happening and how he's kind of become the person that he is and why he's so terrible. So you were already in that time kind of building up empathy towards him, even though he hasn't necessarily like lessened his cruelty towards the heroine just yet. But yeah, unfortunately, I had to DNF this one because I was like, I'm just not in a spot where I can read a non-HEA. So DNF this one at about 50%. Then I read another book for about 10%. Then I had a success. I read Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe. It's the first book in a duet. It's a dark romance. We've got like a criminal psychologist, serial unaliver hero. So our heroine, London, is a criminal psychologist assigned to evaluate our hero, who is Grayson, this convicted serial. From the very beginning, it's clear that Grayson's pretty manipulative and really challenges London's sanity. And he almost wants to play psychologist and get under her skin and get in her head as much as she is determined to get inside his. This, I think, felt like Criminal Minds, but it was like a little sexy. In the hands of another author, this setup could have been kind of boring or corny or not well done, but I think Trisha Wolfe really did a good job making this very convincing. She's got a pretty firm grasp on how human minds work. There was a lot of manipulation. I loved that you couldn't always tell like when one of the characters was trying to manipulate the other. You couldn't really always tell what was real or what was like one of the characters trying to get something out of the other one. And you really started to question like whether or not the heroine was just playing into the hero's hand or whether she's actually like winning and actually able to manipulate him. It was very, very entertaining, really scratched an itch for me. So I ended up giving this one a rating of 4 stars. Then I DNF'd another book, and then I DNF'd another book, but I made it pretty far in. Bone Deep by Rachel Chadwick. I got 50% into this one. So this is like a psychological dark romance. It's got like, I would argue like a little bit more of like a thriller feel or like a horror. Be forewarned, there's a lot of like body horror because the heroine works as an embalmer, and one day she's trying to just take a little bit of a break and she ends up running into Patrick Dalton, who is our hero. He's very warm, very charming, gentle, and they just sort of develop a relationship from there, but they've both got a lot of things buried in their past that they're gonna have to deal with. So I don't know that really sold that book or really set that up well. I think sentence level writing of this book, very good. I think some of the macro level storytelling kind of got a little bit clunky for me. It definitely is supposed to be a dark romance. That's how this is marketed, but I would argue that this reads a lot more like a thriller because the relationship doesn't have that like dark, sinister feel so much as like kind of like a creepy, eerie, little bit of twistedness. It has a lot of really great descriptions with precise descriptions that were very short that gave you a great sense of a person or the setting. I felt like the dialogue and human interactions, you could feel the characters' familiarity with one another, which I really liked because there'd been quite a few books that was something that I was noting a lot is just clunky, awkward dialogue where I'm like looking at how a conversation was happening in some of these other books and I was just like, that's not how people talk. So that was really done well. And I think that the author really did a great job with the kind of like franticness, that obsession, portraying that in a way that was like a little bit eerie. Unfortunately, I think where this started losing me is that there was scenes and moments that left a lot of information dangling, because I felt like we were getting a lot of repetition. We were getting a lot of her being at work, doing something, getting interrupted by somebody, having an interaction. And we were just kind of losing some of the momentum and some of the build that some of these scenes were providing, where there was like one scene where like three very critical pieces of information about her past kind of all get revealed, and she explains one piece, but there's two other pieces that are just left. I kind of feel like we need to build this up so we have a sense of who this character is, because if we wait till further in, I don't think that that's really gonna be an effective reveal. I could totally be wrong. Again, I DNF'd it at 50%. So I just felt like there was opportunities kind of left on the table in favor of repeatedly going back to her work and dealing with dead bodies, which I'm like, why is this happening at the open of like every couple of chapters? And it just kind of felt like the author, she had an idea of what she wanted to do with each of the scenes that she had in mind, but it was like she couldn't figure out how to tie the scenes themselves together. I ended up DNFing this one at 50% just because I was feeling like this just was reading so much like a thriller. I wasn't feeling like a lot of depth to the characters. I wasn't feeling a lot of depth to their relationship. It was just a lot about the tension, the eeriness, the obsession of one of the characters. So anyways, DNF'd that one at 50%. But I do think it'll be something that works for some people, just unfortunately not for me. Then I DNF'd another book. So then I read North Country by K.A. Tucker. This is a standalone contemporary romance. It's got kind of a romantic suspense, second chance, forbidden romance. Kevin is wanting to hug my foot. What are you doing, my guy? He's just wanting to use my foot as a pillow. Okay, that's normal. Yeah, heroine's like single mom. Did I say it's small town? Let's get into it. So this takes place in Canada, I think Ontario, if I remember correctly. Our heroine once was very much in love with her next door neighbor, but when he was 18, he ended up doing something that destroyed his future and got him thrown in prison. And although she tried to keep the relationship alive while he was put away, he eventually was like, you need to move on. So this picks up 20 years later. She's built a life for herself. She's still living in that same small town, but she is working on the police force, something that she always dreamed of. She's divorced with a teenage daughter and has kind of like a tentative understanding with her daughter's father, who is the mayor of the town. They kind of have to work in tandem because of their roles. But anyways, our hero Logan ends up moving home after 2 decades behind bars. The town is not exactly excited to have him back the same way his family is, and he's trying to readjust to life in this town and keep under the radar because of his parole. But then a teenage girl from the town, one of the heroine's daughter's friends, that was a lot of possessives, but I think you followed that. She ends up going missing, and the town's looking for someone to blame. And who better than the new felon that just moved back to town? I think this just had like a ton of tension to it. I think the setup of this to really make this a forbidden romance was very effective. Like genuinely, I was like, I don't think they should be together. I think this is actually a very bad plan. I thought the dynamics of the small town were very realistic, of people being nosy but sweet, and the way people's opinions are changed and swayed. I loved that there was like an older heroine that's like established in her life. She's got, an older kid. She's attempting to co-parent. There was just, I think, a lot that made this different and unique. I didn't love this book as much as I wanted to, though, because a lot of this I felt like was focused on the investigation, which although was interesting, I just wanted more in the present day romance because I wanted more romance. I just felt like we weren't getting enough scenes of them together, and I wanted more of that. So I don't think this is a bad book. I think this is like definitely just taste more so than anything. So I'm rating this purely based on that 3 stars. Then I DNF'd another book at 10%. Then I DNF'd another book at 30%. And this one I wanted to work so bad. Okay, so this one is Not Made to Last by McLean. So this is gonna sound like a really corny setup, but I promise this worked. Basically, the heroine ends up hitting the hero with her truck when she's making like an Uber Eats type delivery. And it's not like a bad hit, but he kind of uses this as a way to escape from a party that's happening at his house. He just is like, I'm gonna hang out with this girl that's very cute. But it turns out that the heroine is his rival from basketball. It's his sister. And so like obviously things can't really happen between them, but he has become obsessed. So I was like so sad when this one didn't work out for me. I think that this could work for other people though. So I feel like that's why I want to go into like a little bit more depth on this one, because I think for some people, the things that bothered me are not going to bother you, and you're going to have like such an amazing time with this book. And I'm like so freaking jealous because I think it really nailed it with the like angsty teenage love where there's sort of like an instant connection, incredible chemistry that is built up with very little interaction, very good banter. I think realistic with the kind of like instantness for that age, but also like was able to back it up. But I think that there was just kind of like a certain immaturity to this writing, unfortunately. There was sort of like this secret identity set up that I was like, okay, based on the context and information that both of these parties have, one of them at least has to know who the other person is. And I couldn't tell if they were supposed to know or not. Like it just, that part wasn't set up well. But then like other pieces, it was like the author was like really self-conscious about how unrealistic some of the things that they were trying to set up were. They would like err on the side of like trying to over-explain everything to make sure that like all the pieces fit together. And it's like, guys, it is real. And then there was like a younger character that was getting like too much page time. I just don't really care about kids' perspectives, and it's just not interesting to me. And it was kind of like dragging out the story. So unfortunately, I ended up DNFing it because anytime that the hero and heroine weren't interacting, I just didn't give a crap. But I loved their chemistry, and so I really, really, really wanted it to work. But I got 30% in, and I was like, dang it, I definitely need to DNF this. Then I read Good at Being Alive by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This, I believe, is a standalone. It's a contemporary romance. We've got a fake marriage, reality TV. Our heroine, Bex, lost her entire family in kind of a freak train accident, a train that she was actually supposed to be on herself, but she was running a little bit late like normal. So this leaves her responsible for the travel agency that her family has, which is how she comes in contact with her father's UK partner by the name of Theo. He ends up revealing to her that the business is about to go under. Now, before her father had passed, he actually negotiated a reality TV deal. And although that initial kind of like story or plan can't go ahead, Theo and Bex end up deciding to pose as newlyweds that are going on kind of like a globe-trotting extended honeymoon to all these different locations. But unfortunately, these two could not be more different. So they're gonna have to get along and make a convincing couple in front of the camera as things heat up behind the camera. So overall, I think this one just took a while for me to settle into. It ended up working in the end, and maybe my feelings will change upon reread, kind of knowing the character arc and the direction of the story. I don't really like this type of heroine from Elizabeth O'Rourke. It's just this one that like doesn't have her crap together to the point of feeling kind of like entitled and kind of coming across dim-witted, a little bit like 2010s Jennifer Lawrence, where it's like, I love bacon and hate exercise. But as I warmed up to her, I found myself kind of like warming up to the book more and more. You start to see more and more throughout the story how much her personality has been shaped by other people's opinion of her and the stories they have told her about who she is. And so I think once you start peeling back some of that, then you have a lot more sympathy. And so that's why I think like on reread, maybe I would feel differently about the story. There is, I don't know, it's hard to call it a slow burn because genuinely at the beginning, I just felt no chemistry whatsoever. And usually with Elizabeth O'Rourke slow burns, I feel something, even if it's like hatred, even if it's a little bit of a rivalry, even if it's like kind of antagonistic banter, there's like something happening there that I'm like, ooh, that's gonna be sexy later. And this, I was like, genuinely, we have two wildly different people. Like they actually don't feel like they should go together. As they learn more about each other, then the banter really starts to get going. Then it really starts to emerge and have some chemistry and some romance. But I think because you don't feel that chemistry building from the beginning, that it doesn't quite feel like a slow burn in the same way that I would think of some of her other books. I do like that this explored some very complicated grief, loving them, but realizing that they're very human and not liking some of the things that they've done in their past. I do wish we got more of the hero. I feel like he remained a mystery for most of this. And the heroine even calls that out as like a reason that she's kind of frustrated with him. So kind of am suspecting that's a little bit of a narrative choice, but there's still like a part of me that's like, yeah, but still, like as as a reader, like I want more. So overall, I enjoyed this one, but I do feel like it's like a little bit forgettable in the grand scheme of like Elizabeth O'Rourke's books and is not nearly as emotional as I would have expected for a book that is so much about grief. Two notes that I want to make. One is about the audiobook. The narrators do a great job with their own genders. When they do the opposite gender's voice, oh my God, horrible. Hers gets nasally and whispery. His just becomes like high-pitched and also whispery. Didn't like that. So just wanted to give audiobook listeners a heads up on that one. And then weirdly, this has a ton of Harry Potter references. The author of that series is so diabolical. I was just a little bit shocked that we included those references. So just wanted to warn people about that one. I gave this one a rating of 4 stars when I finished the book, but honestly, like the further I get away from it, the more I forget about it, that I kind of am feeling like maybe it's more of a 3. All right, and then I read Before the Exhale by Alyssa Wilde. This is a standalone college romance. It's friends to lovers, he falls first, golden retriever hero. We've got healing and trauma and slow burn. The heroine Ivy is about halfway through her freshman year, and she is just trying to fly under the radar and just kind of robotically going through the motions of college because it's the only way that she really knows how to cope with the trauma that she's been dealing with. When she ends up meeting Wes, who is this smart, athletic, he's very charming, and he's a senior in college, and they end up meeting in a public speaking class that throws them together. And it turns out Wes is really not who she was expecting. She was expecting someone really like cocky, but it turns out he's very kind and patient, and really she just has his full attention whenever they are together, and he really believes in her in a way that a lot of the people around her just haven't. And maybe he's gonna help her to survive this public speaking class that she has been dreading. So overall, I really liked this because I felt really sweet. It was really cute. I just felt like this was the sweetest parts, the most patient parts of like how someone in college would actually fall in love. There are a few things that prevented it from being a 5-star, like a perfect 5-star, but it's like so close. I really loved the hero. Although he's kind of like the big man on campus, he was still very different than I think what you see in a lot of new adult college sports romances. He's this big teddy bear. He's a little bit of a goof. He's very patient, not the typical playboy. He's very friendly, but not like overly extroverted. He's not even planning to go into the NFL. He has different plans with the heroine. We're primarily in her perspective. Great job of describing isolation and the panic and the distracted thoughts she has as a result of the trauma that she's been experiencing. She's not necessarily like deeply processing and intellectualizing what's happening to her, but just like painting the experience of what's happening, those trauma responses that she's having, that fear of judgment about talking about it, holding back, not wanting to have to relive what happened to her. So she's not really opening up to the people around her. There's even descriptions of depersonalization that I thought were really realistic, and even just like the sabotaging of the relationship because she just doesn't want to confront the trauma that she's experienced. And that's something that she's going to have to do if she wants that relationship to go deeper. And I just thought that that did a good job without the trauma being her entire personality. She still wants a lot of these like college experiences, but is struggling to really be able to have those things because of the trauma. I will say there is a ton of other woman drama, so if you don't like that, just a heads up. There's a lot of ladies that don't like her because of her attachment to Wes, but there's also another gal from her high school that's going to this college that has like a particular vendetta against her that she's also dealing with. So she's kind of just getting it from all angles with that. So just heads up if you don't like that. I don't think that this will be the book for you. One of the things that I really, really love, and I know I've talked about this previously of like the opposite happening in books where I'm not making any sense. Should I tell you what I'm trying to talk about? I loved that love doesn't fix everything. Like it is a support system. Wes is someone she can turn to, but ultimately she really does have to go and get professional help. So I really like that her relationship with Wes wasn't like the cure-all for everything and then just like suddenly she was better because she was in love. Feel like sometimes that's kind of the message that certain romances unfortunately end up sending with how they end up dealing with some of the trauma. Where this lost me just a little bit, unfortunately, is the ending. It spent so much time tying up every little detail into a nice little bow, and it was just a little bit too much. It made things kind of drag out. Also, unfortunately, I think like the placement of the spicy scene didn't feel very satisfying because it's not this like pinnacle emotional moment. It's like done more as like part of the wrap up of now that everything's hunky-dory, now she's in a place where she can do this. Like that's not like emotionally where it feels the most like charged. It has the most tension and build up for it. It just got like chucked in with no tension and no anticipation, and it kind of removed some of the emotional satisfaction that you would get from a scene like that typically. So I just felt like this book truly could have lobbed off like 4 chapters and it would have been perfect. This one's a rating of 4.5 stars because it's like it's so close. It just like dragged on just a little bit too long, and it made that ending a little bit less satisfying as a result. Then I moved on to Hot Blooded by Heather. Oh shoot, someone told me how to pronounce her last name and now I'm forgetting. Guerre? I hope that's right. It's the second book in the Tooth and Claw series. It's a paranormal romance. This one is focused on vampires. It's got sort of an arrangement. It's not even like an arranged relationship. We'll just get into what this book's about because there's like no way to explain it. Well, there is a way to explain it. It's just through the actual synopsis. So our heroine, Tessa, is saddled with just an insurmountable amount of debt. She's having to take care of her family, so she's not really able to make ends meet with her job as a nurse doing night shifts. So she ends up signing up with an agency that assigns willing blood donors with vampires. And that's how she ends up meeting Amos, who has signed up for the service. He was hoping he was going to find a blood mate at some point. It just doesn't seem to be happening. So he's like, I'm going to enlist this blood matching service. The heroine arrives for the first session. She's expecting fear and pain, and this like scary predator is completely unprepared for the fact that he's very sweet, he's kind, he's protective, and turns out she experiences like the opposite of pain. I thought this was bizarrely, it was like so horny, but so sweet and endearing at the same time. And I think this was like such a nice reprieve after the emotional ringer of the prior book. The hero is so respectful, so sweet, while also because he is a vampire and has these kind of predator instincts, this edge of danger and want that's right there, but he's so in control of it. And she's able to just not have to overthink it because she's not ever truly in danger. She just can enjoy herself and release some of the emotional weight that she is constantly dealing with, caring for her mother and getting them out of this medical debt, and then also having a very demanding role as a night nurse. So just really able to just like relax and enjoy. And it was just like you could feel the emotional weight lift off of her. And I liked that they both were very mature in their approach to their relationship. They might get into arguments or disagreements or have a misunderstanding, but then they would kind of like take a beat, feel hurt, and then address the situation and be like, wait, okay, let's get this figured out. Oh, sorry, you misunderstood what I was saying, or I communicated that poorly, and got it addressed pretty immediately or apologized for the reaction. And just really, I felt like they had really good communication. Also, I liked how they resolved the humans aging differently than vampires. It was in a different way than I've ever seen it, so I thought that was fun. But overall, I give this one a rating of 4 stars. All right, so then I moved on to Sanctuary by Claire Kent. This is the 6th book in the Kindled series. It's a post-apocalyptic, kind of like in Rivals to Lovers, I guess. So this is 8 years after a meteor has struck Earth and destroyed civilization. Our heroine is the sister of the heroine from the book prior. They've joined a community where they've got a little bit more of a system, a little bit more established. Our heroine, Brianna, spends most of her time working as a courier. So she goes out, does jobs for another community, and kind of barters or trades for different things that the community then needs. But she is competing with Aiden, who has a long established history in this area and claims that all of the jobs that she's been taking on are actually his, causing them to constantly be in conflict and trying to steal jobs from one another. So overall, I enjoyed this one. I like being back in this world, but I think unfortunately this is probably my least favorite in the series. Is that because of how I've been feeling? Maybe could this also just be the book itself? also maybe. I think this feels a lot different from earlier books because we have like an established community with established roles, and there's not as much of a like survival element to this, which I think is something that I really liked in a lot of the other book. I like the kind of like scrappiness, and there's still some of that because like you don't have all the modern conveniences, but a lot of that is kind of taken away with having that established community that they're always kind of going back to. The heroine is much more feisty, defaults to joking instead of like dealing with her feelings, which like, girl, same. I liked her. I thought she was fun. The hero is a lot chattier than I think the other heroes we've had. I don't know. I kind of struggled to like totally love him. I don't know how to explain this other than like, this is not who I would want to be with in like a post-apocalyptic setting, because like a hot British former marketing exec just doesn't feel like someone that's going to take care of me. I'm so sorry. This guy would be great for contemporary, but a post-apocalyptic? No, I need someone who's going to be able to fight off all the big scaries. So I don't know. I think that might have impacted some of my enjoyment as well. I also felt like some of the emotional reveals were a little bit clunky in this, kind of like snowball from like one admission into like, and it turns out I've always loved you. Kind of came out of nowhere. And also some of the like things that the heroine found traumatic. She's got a lot of trauma around like boinking because she's had to use it a lot to survive. And like she hears other people going at it and she's like, it's like great for them. Like, no, I'm like really happy for them. It's like totally fine, but I just didn't want to hear it. I'm like, girl, same. I don't want to hear it either. And I don't even have trauma. Just like anybody wouldn't want to hear some of this stuff. I end up giving this one a rating of 3 stars. I love this series. This just wasn't my favorite. Ugh. And then I DNF'd another book. I got like 10% into this one. Then I finally finished the Alpha Claims series. I read book 2 and 3. So basically this is an Omega verse. It's dark romance, dystopian. I'll tell you about the first book because this is one that you do have to read in order. So our heroine's name is Claire and she is one of the rare Omegas. She's sheltering with kind of a dwindling enclave of very frightened Omegas that are just trying to find a way to scrape by, to be fed, because there is so much chaos and disorder that even to just like go out and try and find food could threaten their life and result in them being like forcibly bonded with an alpha. So our hero is Shepherd and he is ruthless. His reputation is ruthless and he is actually ruthless. He has risen up basically from like the prison layer that's underground, gone with his prison buddies basically, and taken over the upper city. And it's resulted in just like heinous things happening, most notably food shortages and just ruthless forcible pair bondings. Just society's basically collapsed here. One day Clara gets really desperate and decides that she's gonna go try and beg the hero to send some food to these Omegas, and she goes into heat abruptly right in front of him, resulting in him claiming her. I'm just gonna talk about both books kind of at the same time because I liked the first book that I read. I read it a while ago, but the ending really frustrated me because I felt like it kind of ruined the entire book because it was just like such a betrayal. But you get into the second book, you kind of realize that that betrayal maybe wasn't what it quite seemed, but it has destroyed the relationship between Claire and the hero. And so a lot of the second book is really feeding the uprising to rise up against this like tyrannical government. And then the other part is really the repair or attempted repair of their relationship. So I liked the second half of that book because I felt like that did a lot of what I was like, hoping to get more of in the first book. So there's like real strides towards them trying to understand each other's perspectives since they're like on other sides of this like war basically. So I enjoyed that one. I gave it 4 stars. Then I moved on to the third book in the series, and this is the last book for this couple. The series does continue on, but it's like other couples that they're covering. I was enjoying it because I felt like we were really starting to get like a deeper understanding between these characters, but I just didn't feel like we were making enough strides because this was like the last book. There was like still too much, for lack of a better term, like hate fucking kind of happening. It was like, well, biologically, I just need this. And them not really figuring out how do we reconcile these differences in opinion that we have about like how to address society and the collapse of society. I felt like the ending of this book sort of fit their relationship, right? Like I didn't feel like they had enough development to get full send HEA, but at the same time, it was kind of frustrating because I felt like there was so much build and so much done with the relationship only for it not really have a conclusive answer at the end. There's sort of an, it non-traditional HEA? It's sort of like an implied HEA, I guess. Felt like so much of first book and the last book, or no, even the second book, it was like the heroine just not really ever getting to be happy. And I just wanted her to have a break, like have a moment of relief. And I just didn't even feel like she got that with the way things ended. I don't know. I'm like so conflicted because on the one hand, it kind of feels like it fits the story. And on the other hand, I just kind of feel like I got dragged through 3 different books only to like not have things really wrap up and feel like I got a lot of repetition, which could have felt like a slow burn if it wrapped up different. I don't know. I'm very conflicted. I think I initially rated this like 4 stars, but I'm feeling more like a 3-star for this like last book. I don't know. All right. Those are all the books that I read in June. I would love to hear from you now, what you read in June, how your reading month went. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions on them as well, if they're the same, if they're different than mine. And with all of that, thank you so much for making it to the end. I know these videos are long, so I really appreciate you making it to the end of this video. You are the real MVP. Don't forget, if you've made it this far, interact with the video in some capacity, hype it up, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more content from me as well. I really, really hope I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.